My name's Elayne Chou, and I'm going to be leading you through this workshop on self-leadership in your career. Just a brief introduction of myself. I am a psychologist. I used to work here at UC Berkeley for many years. I actually am excited to be here today in part because I was part of the initial group of staff on campus about 10 years ago who initially developed some of the staff career development program offerings, put together some of the workshops, and provided individual career counseling and assessment services for staff. I think some people in this room maybe even that I remember speaking with then. And some of the website materials that are still available to staff. So it's exciting to see that this conference has now become part of this program and to be invited to be part of that. I have a private practice in Berkeley where I see individuals and help people in career transition. And I also help organizations with their assessment, hiring, and development of high potential employees. So career development is a real passion of mine, and excited to be here. I wanted to just have a moment for you all to get a chance to introduce yourselves to each other. Maybe just turn to someone next to you very quickly, say who you are, and then tell each other what the best skill is that you get to use at work. Okay? Can I get somebody to just share with me what was a skill that either they shared or that they had somebody share with them that they use? Go ahead.
We both talked about empathy.
Empathy. Okay. Wonderful. Yeah. What do you do?
I'm a development officer for the hospital in Texas.
Okay, so development officer and using empathy. That's wonderful. Anything else? Yeah. Academic advisors, communication, listening skills. Wonderful. Anything else? One more. Yeah.
Building relationships that's safe across campus.
Building relationships. Wonderful. So I will tell you, this is a wonderful group. I oftentimes ask that question and I get a lot of what I would call hard skills, right? The functional skills, the technical skills that people need to do their job. Maybe it's budgeting, maybe it's analysis. I do get sometimes some soft skills. That's a lot of what I heard here. Those are the skills that help you get along with people, right? It's the skills that makes you somebody that people want as a colleague, make you someone who's very hireable, right? You can't just do the job, but you're also fun to be around, or at least not a pain in the neck to work with. So being able to communicate, right? Having empathy. Actually, the empathy, you're gonna hear about a little bit more when I start talking more about self-leadership. The set of skills I don't get a lot oftentimes is things like that. And I consider empathy to be a skill that is maybe even what I would call a meta skill, right? So there are certain skills that are foundational to other skill development. And those are the kinds of things that I consider self-leadership skills. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but what a wonderful group. So organizations, all workplaces, pretty much society in general has been experiencing, as we move into the 21st century, more and more change, right? More and more uncertainty because of technological advances and social changes and just the pace. There's so much more knowledge out there and available to us, so we all feel like we need to have more of that, and it just feels like there's never enough time. And that's true, I think, here on campus these days, that there is uncertainty and there is a lot of ambiguity sometimes for staff about, where jobs are headed and what the climate is going to be like in the next year. So I know that can be stressful, and whether or not you yourself feel that, if people around you are feeling it, right, then we pick up on that. And so it's important, I think, to have resilience and to be able to manage that kind of low-level underlying stress that's just there. That's just part of the air we breathe and the environment. And that's a lot of what self-leadership is about. That's what we're going to talk about. And just as an aside, I couldn't help but notice when I was watching the speeches last night at the Democratic National Convention that our president spoke a lot. He didn't call it self-leadership, but he spoke a lot last night, I think, about character and about a lot of fundamental skills that are important to have as a citizen of this country, as a citizen of the world. And so I actually think that a lot of what self-leadership is about is related to character. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But just to put all of this in that context of, it's not just important for your work life, your job, it's also important for who you are in the business of your life, to understand how to be a leader. And this is true whether you literally manage people or not, right? So I'm not talking about leaders in the sense of people who have management responsibilities, although of course they also benefit from self-leadership skills. This is about, regardless of what your job title is, regardless of what your position is, that we all have leadership potential. So quickly, the agenda that I have, reflecting, envisioning, and acting, that's the theme of the conference. And let me just share a quick story, because that quote is one of my favorite quotes. I find that for me, going to the beach, going to the ocean does help build my resilience, give me some perspective when I'm feeling stressed. And I would invite all of you to reflect for yourselves on some examples of times in your life when you've had challenges, when you've had difficult moments, and you've been able to get through it, and to figure out what it was that you pulled from somewhere inside of you in those moments to help you get through that. For me, one of the things that I learned, I grew up in Indiana, and it's a landlocked state, not a lot of access to the ocean, so I didn't really spend a lot of time at the beach until I was in my 20s. I went on a trip with my sister when we were in our early 20s and got to go snorkeling for the first time. And I was so excited on the boat ride out there. The snorkel instructor was telling us all the wonderful things we were going to see. So I was one of the first ones off the boat, into the water, fins on. I'm like kicking, just going everywhere I could go in this area that we were told that we could snorkel in. And I didn't see much. I just, I saw some things. I didn't see a lot that was as exciting as what I'd been led to believe we were going to see. So went and found my sister, who had basically not moved very far from where she had first dropped into the water, and got her attention and said, this is like, there's nothing to see here. And she said, well, that's because you're moving too much. She said, just hold still and float and just look, in one place. And when you stop moving, then the animals will come out and, there'll be a lot to see. And she was right. And so then, for the next 10, 20 minutes, I was able to really see a lot by not kicking around and moving and doing. My sister's name is Sophie, which means wisdom. And so I've since come to learn that she has a lot of wisdom to offer. And so that's one of the things I got from that experience, was to draw on the people in my life who I think have some natural self-leadership skills, and learn from them. And then also to just remember that story for myself, right? That maybe there are times when I'm stressed or having a difficult time, and I have to remind myself, am I kicking too much? Am I moving around? Am I doing too much, just trying to get it all in? And maybe I need to stop and be still a little bit. Okay, so I encourage all of you to find those stories from your own background to reflect on. So what is self-leadership? You can find a lot of research, a lot of writing about it, and people have their different takes on it. What I would say from my study of it, and just from working with people around this concept, is that it comes down to two main areas. It's character strength, and it's critical thinking skills. Okay? And so, again, back to this idea of meta skills, I think that these two areas are things that no matter what you do, developing your character, developing your critical thinking abilities is going to provide that foundation to build other skills, to build resilience. It's interesting because character is, I think, when you're going through a difficult time, you dig down deep, and that's where you find that strength, right, is through your character. The last session, I was upstairs just for a little bit listening to the session that was for managers. And there was a comment made, which I hear a lot when I talk to managers, that, probably better to hire for your team people who already have the character or the judgment so that they're a good fit for the culture of your team, than to think that you can develop that, right? That you can always help people develop the technical skills, the functional skills, but it's harder to develop the character or the attitude. I actually don't completely subscribe to that, otherwise I wouldn't be sitting here saying that you could learn to develop this. So I do think that you can develop your character and teach it. Now, whether a manager, has that bandwidth to make that part of what they do, I totally see how that may not be, in the scope of what they consider what they want to do. But I do think that it's important to develop that because it is a big piece, right, of what it takes to be successful in work. There are 4 different areas of character that I think are particularly open to development, and these are your locus of control, self-efficacy, a growth mindset, and empathy, which we've already touched on a little bit. So internal locus of control, this is the idea that you are in control of your own fate, right? That it's not determined by external forces, whether that's another person or fate in general, that you can affect control, right, over what happens to you. And having that belief helps, right? It helps because it gives you something that you can hold on to that is in your control. So, promotions, titles, awards, trophies, those are nice. They're certainly motivating for many people. And it's not always in your control, right? You can do what you can do to get those, but if that's the sole determinant of success in your mind, then you're locating that sense of control, that sense of feeling that you have the ability to get what you want in life outside of yourself, right? Building on that a little bit, self-efficacy then is your belief that you can handle things. So I think it's sometimes easier to define self-efficacy in terms of what it's not. So self-confidence is sometimes what people think self-efficacy is, right? So I see self-confidence as the outcome. That's what you earn, that's what you get when you've done something, when you've accomplished something, and then you know you can do it, right? Then you have the self-confidence to do it again in the future. But what happens when you're confronted with something that you've never done before? And that's often the case, right? You're oftentimes faced with a problem that you haven't actually had to solve before, or there's a lot of moving parts, there's a lot of complexity to it. How do you know that you're going to succeed? How can you work up the courage to take that risk of trying something? That ability to do that, that is self-efficacy. It's just a belief that I think I can do it, or at least I'm confident or comfortable enough with trying, right? And even if I fail, even if it doesn't work out, I think of failure as feedback, right? It's not so much a hard stop as much as, okay, a course correction, right? So that is self-efficacy. And a growth mindset. So Carol Dweck is a psychologist who wrote a book called Mindset, which I highly recommend. And she talks about this idea of a fixed mindset as opposed to a growth mindset, right? So a fixed mindset is the idea that we're born with or without certain abilities or talents, okay? Whether that's athletic ability, artistic ability, people skills, intelligence, however you think about it, right? And that you either have it or you don't. And so maybe you figure out as you get older, what you have and what you don't have, and then you just kind of try to play to your strengths, right? A growth mindset says that, well, actually with most things, you can get better if you work hard and practice, right? That you're not just stuck with what you happen to get, right? Yeah, some people probably start off with a little bit more of some than others, but that doesn't mean that you can't develop in these areas. And I heard an NPR story about a great research study that was really looking at this applied to our ideas about our math ability, right? And how we teach children math. And they were looking at how we teach math in the United States versus how we teach math in Asian countries. I think they were looking at Taiwan in particular. And they had the example of having gone to many, many classrooms and observing a phenomena that happens in both cultures, which is having a child during a math class be up at the front of the room trying to solve a problem on the board, right, in front of the whole class. And what they observed was that more often than not in the United States, and they think it's because we tend to have a fixed mindset, right, about math ability, that the kid was either going to be able to do it or not, and that essentially they floundered if they couldn't figure out how to solve the problem, right? And then another kid would get called on to try to come up and do it until they found the kid in the class who could solve the problem, right? And it made a lot of kids in the classrooms not want to even volunteer, because if they couldn't do it, it was kind of embarrassing. They felt very exposed. They're up there by themselves. Whereas in the classrooms they observed in Asia, what they recognized was that it seemed like, yeah, there'd be one kid at the front, but that the other kids in the classroom would often be calling out suggestions for how to solve it. They weren't always correct suggestions. It didn't always get to the right solution. They might have to try a bunch of different suggestions, but there wasn't this idea that you either have it or you don't. It seemed like the kids all felt like, sure, they could all learn how to solve this problem if they just tried enough, right? And so the difference there in terms of maybe the society as a whole and their conception of their abilities, right, in math, you can see where that makes a huge difference, right? So, and then empathy. Empathy, I think, I throw in there in part because when you talk about inner locus of control, when you talk about self-efficacy, when you talk about a growth mindset, it can sound almost kind of overly self-absorbed, right? Like it's all about us fostering our own leadership abilities. But I actually think that you can't be good at self-leadership unless you do have the ability to take that perspective outside of yourself, right? To be able to take the perspective of the other, to be able to see yourself through others' eyes and to see other people through their eyes helps bring into sharper focus your understanding of yourself. And maybe one of the ways to test yourself on this is just to ask yourself a question, which I ask people a lot if I'm interviewing them, which is, how are you most misperceived by others? Okay, so if you can answer that, then that suggests to me that you've gotten that feedback, or you've heard people say things, or you've observed how people approach you or communicate with you. And maybe you've had to even correct that misperception, or maybe that's something that you don't know how to correct, but you're aware of. And sometimes people don't know. They don't know how they're misperceived, and that tells you, there's some work there, right, in terms of understanding the perspective that you have on yourself and that others have on you. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about critical thinking skills today, because I think I could spend a whole day just talking about critical thinking. But the reason I have that up there is because I don't think that you can make good decisions, good quality decisions in your life, and show good judgment without critical thinking ability. Okay? And so that ability to really recognize what kind of assumptions you're making in how you view things, the assumptions that other people are making, the ability to connect the dots and see connections, and then recognize the downstream consequences of your decisions. Those are all relevant to critical thinking and to self-leadership. All right. Let's apply this to your career. So it makes sense, right, to think of this as developing from the inside out, as opposed to from the outside in. So your development as a worker, your development in life, isn't dependent upon the schooling necessarily that you got, the kinds of people that you work, who you happen to have as a boss, whether you have a good relationship with them or not. There's still always something that you can draw upon from inside to help yourself. What about this idea of a career versus a job? I mean, who can give me a sense of what you think I'm talking about, or how you see the difference there between a career and a job? Yeah.
Maybe it's like perception is career is I'm passionate about every day I get up, I do this job, and I'm feeling it. Like some of my people work every day they get up to get kids into higher ed who don't have those opportunities. And that is what they're doing every day, is what they're passionate for. Job was like, okay, I'm here. It's kind of paycheck. There, it's like, okay, when the clock goes out, I got another life, whatever, that's my passion. That's my perception, whatever, just to start off the conversation.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I would imagine that a career would feel more deliberate, whereas a job just sort of is something that pays the bills.
One more. Anybody else? Thought? Back in the back there?
What other people have echoed of earning a paycheck.
So a career is something that has a trajectory, and a job is just for this time. Yeah. One more?
So just real quick, a career sounds so much better than just a job. I think they heard me.
A career sounds better than a job. Yeah. I mean, I would say for sure all the things that were said, definitely, and maybe the distinction that I focus on the most is that a job typically belongs to somebody else, right? It belongs to the organization that created it, that defined it, right? And that put out the requisition to hire you. And you can certainly feel a lot of ownership over your job, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. But regardless of whether you're the best person who's ever done this job, if you were to move on, as long as they still need that job, it's going to be filled by somebody else, right? It's a role. Your career is portable, right? That follows you. You create that, and it goes with you. And so it encompasses more than just a job. It encompasses all the jobs that you've ever done and will do, right? So it's more than just what's on your resume. It's actually, your resume, is more than just the compilation of jobs. It's, what you've built over time by having all the different jobs you've had. It's also, I think to your point, from my perspective, I think of career as pretty much encompassing everything that you put time and energy into over the journey of your life. So it's not just paid work, like a job, right? It could be unpaid work. It could be volunteer work. It could be internships. It could be work in terms of being with elderly parents, taking care of children. It's all of the ways in which you put time and effort into developing yourself. And therefore, I think of career more as kind of the business of living, right? And I encourage you to think of it that way too, because I think it gives you some empowerment to not feel as maybe pushed and pulled by the ever-shifting sands of anything that's going on campus, right? Or what might be coming down the road, changes that are not well defined, but that are coming. All of those things that you don't have a lot of maybe grasp of or handle on or control over, you can still always come back to focusing on your career, right? And how you're choosing to spend your time. So if you thought of your career as a business, then it's all of it. It's your work life, it's your home life, it's your relationships, it's your health. And it requires leadership, right? Like any organization, like any business. So you have to ask, are you working, right? Are you just a worker? Or are you also showing some leadership, right, in running this business of your life? So tell me, what makes an effective leader? What are some of the qualities of a good manager, a good leader? Yeah.
I shouldn't say having the power, but for lack of a better phrase, getting people to do things that they ordinarily wouldn't. Getting people to do things that they wouldn't ordinarily do.
Mm-hmm. Getting people to do things they wouldn't ordinarily do. Okay. What else? Yeah. Right there.
Make decisions,
Okay.
goals for the future.
Okay. Make decisions, goals for the future.
Someone who can take different points of view and pull them together and try to have the best opportunity from everybody's opinion.
Mm-hmm. Okay. One more over there.
Maintain a vision for the organization.
Okay. Yeah. So these are things that I think are even bigger picture than some of the things that you'll find if you look at the research on what makes for a good manager. But I think I agree with all of it. The having a vision, being able to make good decisions. The research says that effective leaders are people who attend to the mood of their employees, right? They tune in to see how people are feeling. Are they engaged? Are they motivated? That they build their employees' strengths. They actively develop the people that work under them. That they cultivate strong relationships, working relationships, and that they instill a sense of purpose and hope. What about what makes an ineffective leader? Any thoughts on that? This is always more fun. Yes.
Closed door policy.
A closed door policy. Okay. No communication. No listening. Okay. What else?
Assuming the worst.
Assuming the worst. Yeah. That would be pretty bad. What else? Yeah. Micromanaging. Yep. We all love that, don't we? One more over there.
Making it feel like an obligation, like you have to do this because I said so.
Okay, yeah. So there's a transactional obligation there. Yeah, again, agree with all that. Research says it's overloading your employees with responsibilities, micromanaging, right? Losing touch with employees, failing to care, communicating poorly, failing to engage, inspire, motivate. And so, you don't want that kind of manager outside of you that you have to respond to. So it's important to, reflect on how much are you doing that to yourself, right? How much are you overloading yourself? How much are you taking care of your own emotional needs? How much are you tuning in to whether you're getting too focused on the details, right? And losing sight of the big picture. It's important to think about your life the way that maybe if you were running a business, you'd want to be led, right? So we all know what an entrepreneur is, right? This is someone who starts up their own business, starts up their own endeavor. If you work within an organization, we talk about the concept of an intrapreneur, right? So bringing those same ideas that you would to starting something up to your work within an organization. So that might be being good at spotting the need for something, spotting problems that need to be solved. spotting issues that need to be, have attention paid to them, and then coming up with solutions or proposing solutions, taking the opportunity to actually engage people in working together to try to solve problems. If you were thinking about your career in an entrepreneurial way, you would think about things like, well, who are my customers, right? Who am I trying to serve in my career? Who are the stakeholders that I most want to reach and impact? And what is the product or the service that I offer? And is that what I want to offer, or is that just what I can offer? Like, am I offering what I most do well and enjoy doing, right? You would look at things like, am I investing in my business? Am I actually trying to get better, trying to learn, continuing to learn how to do this in new ways? Am I marketing and promoting my business well? Am I getting enough visibility for what I offer so that people who could benefit from it know about it? Okay? All of those kinds of things. So I'm going to ask you to, in a moment, start partnering with people to talk a little bit about how to apply this to your own career. So I've come up with this model using the acronym CAREER to help you structure what it is that you want to be thinking about if you were to adopt this mindset, right? So let's start with C, clarify. So this question of who are your customers, right? Who are the people that you most enjoy serving and reaching, helping, right? In the work that you do or the work that you want to do. So turn to somebody, let's say the person on your left, unless you're far on the left, find somebody to talk to. And let's just take a minute to share with each other the answer to that question. Let's talk about the assess part of the model, right? So once you've clarified, who is it that I'm trying to serve? And what is it that I really am offering? What am I getting paid for? Assessing what you want to stop, and continue doing. So once you know who, right, and what, then are there ways in which you're working, right, that maybe don't work as much for you? Are there people that you feel like really aren't your stakeholders or your constituents or the people that you most want to reach, but they're the main people that you're finding yourself working with, right? Interacting with. Maybe you want to stop that. Maybe you want to think more about whether you take on that kind of work. Are there things you want to start doing more of, right? Are there certain skills that you have that you'd like to use more, that you don't get to use as much in your work? And maybe there are opportunities to do that, but you need to speak up, or you need to find ways, right, to get those opportunities. What about what you want to continue doing, right? Are there things that you're already doing that you really do enjoy, and you want to make sure that that continues to be what you get to focus on and where you develop? Okay, so I want you to think about that, and this time maybe turn to the person on your right, so you're talking to somebody new, and let's answer those questions for ourselves a little. So the R in career stands for relationship building. And here, what I'm talking about is recognizing that to build your career, right, to be taking leadership in your career, you have to be thinking about the people that you know, that you can network with, right? It's common, people say that most people find their jobs through networking, right, through somebody that they know. So that's certainly a reason to do it. But even beyond that, it's important to have people who know you well enough that they're out there advocating for you, right? So that when they hear about something, an opportunity, that it occurs to them, oh, I should refer them to my friend, right? Because I think that they would like that. They'd be good at that. Who are the people that you are championing, right? Are there people that you advocate for? And are you staying in touch with them to hear about what's happened in their life so that you can continue to advocate for them? Who do you celebrate with when you have accomplishments? And are you taking the time to do that, right? And really letting those accomplishments sink in. And then this idea of an advisory board. So just like an organization has a board of directors, a board of advisors, all right, that helps with governance, helps keep the organization true to its mission, make sure that it's healthy. So I would encourage you to create the same kind of thing for your business, your career, right? That you think of who are the people who have been great mentors to you in your career. Maybe they've been former supervisors, maybe they've been former colleagues, maybe it's friends, maybe it's your partner or spouse, whomever it is that you feel you would like to regularly, whether that means monthly or yearly, check in with, convene this group of people, ask them to serve as a sounding board for you, right? And help you hold yourself accountable to the goals that you set for your own career. Also, offer to do the same for them, right? So that you have a chance to be talking about these kinds of things regularly, regardless of whether you have an annual performance review and whether that's useful to you or not. You can create that same, the positive effects of having a regular check-in for yourself. Okay, and it might be even more useful to you if you've created those relationships. And experiences. I'm going to go through a couple more and then have you guys talk again. Experience. So having the opportunity to develop skills through actual work experiences, right? So it's thinking about what are some of the things that you want to develop in your career, and then how can I find ways to do that through maybe volunteering on a committee, maybe it's raising your hand to actually create a program, maybe it's just choosing to lead a meeting, whatever it is, right? What are some of the experiences that you want to have and how do you get those? And then thinking back too on what are the experiences that you have had that have helped you to either gain visibility, that have helped you to really advance in your career, develop some skills, so that you can be thinking about how to do more of that, right? It's not just something that happened to you once, but something that you could actually create a habit of fostering for yourself. And education and training. Are there formal certifications? Are there formal degree programs that would be useful to you to actually consider pursuing? And maybe that means talking to people who are doing the kinds of things that you want to be doing and finding out what kind of education and training have they done, right? Maybe it's going to the career counseling library on campus and doing some research into different kinds of programs that are out there, okay? And when it's all said and done, then having a roadmap. So putting it all in writing when you've done this process so that it's not just in your head. Like these are all nice to haves and we oftentimes think to ourselves, we should be doing this, but putting it down on paper, right? And actually then coming back and revisiting what you've put on paper, right? In some kind of regular schedule so that you can see the progress over time of what you've done to take actions in all of these areas. So once again, find somebody now in a different row from yours to talk to go over these areas and share a little bit about some of the experiences, the relationships that you've had that you'd like to build. Okay. Any thoughts? I mean, just some reflections on what you're getting from this, what you're learning about yourself and your career and how you take leadership and how you can take leadership? Yeah.
I think for me, with the experience item, thanks. For me, with the experience item, the experiences that came to my mind most readily were things in my career that have been really hard, new challenges that I faced that I ultimately worked really hard and got through them, reorganizations where I ended up with new duties that I had no idea how to do. And that is a really big part of my personal brand today, is just the confidence that I built in sort of mastering those subjects. So just reminding myself that I can go into new situations. I'm pretty new at my job here. So reminding myself that I can take on new projects and that they might be overwhelming and challenging at first, but that can really help me in the long term.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, you've done it before, right? So even though whatever new challenge you get thrown into now may not be like some of the previous ones, you've done that before. You've been through that. You've built that resilience. Yeah. That's great. And you're right. I think you can get a reputation for being the person who can do that, who can handle that, right? And that builds on itself in and of itself. Anybody else? Thank you. Yeah.
I think there could be something to be said for the power of networking in here and now to create community and visibility and all that. Because I know you were mentioning, not to put spot, but integrative biology and communities and different things and accessing different underrepresented communities, I believe. And I'm like, oh my God, that's what we do at CEP. Now, I know we're talking about career and everything, but I think this underscores to me the importance of leveraging and not being afraid to ask people about what you do, what's going on, because it's those, I believe, those poolside conversations, sidebar of conference, where the coming together and the unexpected aha moments happen that can advance either your own career or whatever, just bringing people together. So I know it's a rambling thing, but that's connecting people, and you never know what the result is in terms of who knows what could happen. There could be a beautiful connection and networking. Anyway.
No, it's absolutely true. I think, just choosing to come to this conference today, right? Choosing to come to a session that, maybe it wasn't quite clear what you'd be getting from, but, that is all part of putting yourself out there, trying something new, meeting some new people, and making some connections. And you never know, you're right, you never know where something can come from that. I always tell people, if you're at a party and you're feeling awkward, you don't really know what to say to people, ask them, not what they do and stop at that, because that's part of what makes it feel awkward sometimes, but ask them to tell you a story about how they got to do that, right? Like, how did they end up doing that? Like, what was the path to that? I've asked people that just standing in line at the grocery store because it was a long line, and you never know what you will get. And it's always helpful to hear about how other people navigated through some of these things, right? You learn a lot about strategies and examples of leadership. Other reflections anybody has? Yeah.
I think it's important sometimes to talk about the trials and tribulations that you go through, because you could be helping others when you have survived certain things and have made things better, because it makes you stronger inside and it gives you confidence. And when you're saying something to somebody that it will get better or will be different, you're saying it because you've survived it and you've gone through it. And I think it's important that when you have an opportunity to talk about it and lift people up, you should do that.
That's great. Yeah, I think so. I think, it's easy to think that everybody else isn't going through what you're going through, right? To not know that other people have also struggled and maybe with exactly the same thing, right? So when you have to be proactive about sharing about your resilience, I think is a gift. Absolutely. Anything else that anybody wants to share? Right. So I would say, to remember that self-leadership is, it's not a destination. It's really about the daily process of just designing the best you, the best version of you, and that if you bring that kind of attitude and view to your day-to-day work life, to the day-to-day life, I think it becomes more of an adventure, becomes more of a place to be curious. And all of this kind of, to me, begs the question of, well, why do we work at all? Right? So we've been talking a lot about how do we do it in a way that feels good, how do we get through the stressors, but why is it that we would work? And usually the answer to that comes from really looking at your values, right? Like what is it that's most important to you in life? In what do you want to get out of it? I'm sure everybody can come up with their own list of what their most important values are. I just went on to the website and looked at UC Berkeley's principles of community is what they call their values. I guess these were devised by a group of faculty, staff, students, and alumni coming together to talk about it. But you could take a look at those or any other list of values or your own list of values and then try to map out what are the self-leadership behaviors that you demonstrate or could demonstrate in your work life that align with each of those values, right? That really being mindful and conscious of trying to link back to the values behind what you do helps give you that sense of connection to motivation, right? Hope, engagement. So it's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day, kind of just the tasks and the stressors, but thinking about why is it that I work at all? Like what is it that I'm trying to foster, and how could I bring more of that into what I do every day? So in terms of next steps, there's certainly many things that you could do today here at the conference. You could go to the Career Genius Lab. There's all kinds of workshops on campus, the Career Counseling Library, having a career conversation with a mentor or your boss after this session, right? And just reflecting on what you heard today and talking through that more. What I want you to do is to partner up one more time with somebody, maybe somebody that you talk to, who you would feel comfortable having a commitment to supporting each other, right? For the next, let's say, 6 months to a year. The two of you exchange email addresses and you decide what the schedule is that you feel comfortable committing to regularly emailing each other to update, right? On what you've been doing since the last email, on applying some of what you learned today. In your work life, okay? What kinds of self-leadership behaviors, what kinds of actions have you taken in terms of getting experiences, building relationships? So find somebody that you would like to partner with and exchange email addresses. Commit to that. So let me just say that I should have said this up front, but the slides that I've been showing you are going to be posted on, I believe, the conference website. So if you haven't been taking notes or whatever, just know that you can download those slides, I think, after today. And certainly that there is an evaluation form that is available to you that we want feedback on how this session worked for you, didn't work for you. Any feedback is definitely welcome. So please, if you don't have a form, please get one of those. And I guess the last piece here is just for me to open this up to questions. Is there anything that I can answer for anybody about what I presented, about your situation? Any feedback on the session? Was it useful? Did you learn things? Yeah? Do you feel more inspired, more engaged? Yeah? Good. Good. Yeah.
The whole thing about empathy and thinking more outside of yourself. I mean, are there exercises or short of just talking with other people, are there things that you would recommend to help with that?
That's a good question. I mean, certainly I always say start with talking to the person, right? So just trying to understand things from their perspective. But, I think, there are all kinds of exercises starting from very fundamental ones, that are like mirroring exercises where you actually don't talk, but you're actually just sitting across from somebody, and maybe you decide that you're going to be thinking about some topic, and then you just observe, right? And you are with the person. And what you find when people do this is that they start to mirror each other in terms of how they're sitting, how their body energy, that kind of thing. And even just something as fundamental as learning how to attune to somebody, right, non-verbally, can help build that, right? I think hearing people's stories is a great way to build empathy. So just proactively searching for, biographies and reading about people who have experienced things similar to what you're experiencing to find out how other people have dealt with it. Yeah, thank you.
Can you give some examples? Oh, sorry. Can you give some examples of your leadership behavior that you demonstrate?
That's a good question. I would say that one of the things that has been pretty key in my career is introducing myself to people, right? Even when I'm not at work, and looking for ways to connect. So, for example, one of the jobs I had at one point came through a connection with my daughter's preschool, right? So another mom at the preschool had sent out an email about a field trip or something, and I just noticed her signature line and where she worked, and I got curious, and so just reached out and asked to go to tea and hear more about what she did, and that led to eventually a job offer. It wasn't the intention at all, right? But I think adopting the idea that my career and my career mindedness didn't stop when I was at home, right? Or when I was in my mom mode, right? Allowed me to sort of merge those two parts of my life a little bit more, and some opportunities came that way, right? So it's not always easy in our work day to get out of the sphere of the same few people that we interact with all the time, right? And so you probably do have relationships with those folks, but how do you break out of that to meet other people, right? Well, a lot of it's going to have to come from your life outside of work, right? Or time outside of work. And so I think thinking of yourself as always carrying your career around with you, I think maybe is one of those, mindset practices. Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't get left here at work. I mean, I don't want that to sound like you can never leave your work, right? Because we also want to have leisure time and time to decompress. But I mean carrying it with you in the best sense, right? That even when you're not at work or at your desk or logged in, you're still contributing to your career. And that does benefit your employer, right? The things that you experience as an individual out in the world are part of who you are and what you bring to work. And so that's all part of it. And giving yourself some credit for that, I think is important, right? As part of the whole package of who you are. I think we're almost up with our time, but I wanted to just leave you with this quote because it's one that I think, again, to the question of how I've learned to be a leader in my own career and my own life. I think it's sometimes recognizing that it's a process, right? And that it's not about finding the answers, but recognizing that the questions that you have, the things that you're struggling with, the things that you haven't figured out yet, are oftentimes exactly where you need to be, right? That's okay. That you are already doing something just by engaging the questions and by living through those questions. So I wish all of you the best in your careers, and hope that I'll get a chance to talk with more of you individually. Thank you so much.